What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Alright, so this is a video that I've been wanting to do for a while now. Okay, so I'm going to give you my top 5. These were more along the lines of like fan favorite fights. A couple of these I don't know a lot about. I have watched all of these. I don't know a lot of the backstory on some of them though, but let's get right into it, guys. And also, there were a couple that I knew. By the way, my dog's down here, so if you keep hearing like noise or the table moves, it's because he's bumping the table. Stop it. There was a couple of these that I knew were going to be on there, only because they're so popular, they're always talked about, and because they're great fights. So there was a few on here that I knew. I didn't know what order this was going to be in, and I put them in this order because I took a poll on Facebook and Instagram, and I don't remember where else, but I know for sure I did one for Facebook and Instagram. So here we go, guys. Number 5, Jon Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson. This fight is actually one of my personal favorites. Okay, this is my I think second or third favorite fight of all time. At this point in time, Jon Jones was the champion. Alexander Gustafsson had challenged him or had wanted to fight him for a long time. And finally he got the chance. And this was actually the first time that we've ever seen anyone taller than Jon fight in the octagon, fight against Jon in the octagon. Everyone else has been at least either his exact size or shorter. But this was the first time that Jon Jones couldn't use his reach advantage. He had to use pure skill. And so because of that, it was just an all-out brutal fight. I mean, it was just back and forth and back and forth. And in the end, Jon Jones became victorious. I don't agree. I didn't agree with it when I watched it. I thought for sure Alexander Gustafsson had won that. But this was just a great fight, very fun to watch. Even if you don't like Jon Jones, a lot of people don't. I don't like Jon Jones. Even if you don't like him, I mean, to watch this fight, very entertaining. I recommend it big. Number 4, Dan Henderson versus Michael Bisping. This fight was great, and it's not the fact that it was like the Jon Jones or Alexander Gustafsson where it went the distance and it was just a brutal battle. This fight was entertaining because of how it ended. Okay, so the backstory in this fight was Henderson and Bisping coached each other on The Ultimate Fighter. And at the end of the season, they went in the octagon and they got a chance to fight each other. So this was the end of the season. Michael Bisping was just talking and talking and talking. Michael Bisping is a great smack talker. He loves to start fights. He loves to get inside your head, and he's very, very good at it. And Henderson, if I remember correctly, I think Henderson told him, he's like, look, in the octagon, I'm going to make you shut up. I'm going to make you shut your mouth. And at the end of the fight, because he kept throwing this fake inside leg check, and then he would follow it up with a straight jab. And he noticed that every time he did that, Bisping would circle to his right. Well, if you know anything about Dan Henderson loves to throw what's called the H-bomb, where he just throws this big wild hook, and he's known for knocking people out. And that's exactly what happened. Michael Bisping circled to his right, and Dan Henderson stepped in, threw that jab over the top, caught him right on his chin, and then he fell. And Dan Henderson never does this, but when he saw that he fell, he jumped up, flying forearm smash right onto the side of Michael Bisping's face, and it was just a beautiful knockout, my favorite knockout of all time, and so that's why it's number 4. Number 3, Matt Hughes versus Frank Trigg. This fight, and I'm assuming because there was 2 fights that they did, I'm using their second fight because, well, for this reason here. Matt Hughes and Frank Trigg fought, I don't remember which UFC event it was, the first time. And Matt Hughes he took Frank Trigg's back and was on his back, and just he sunk in a rear naked choke. They fell backwards together. and Matt Hughes choked him out. And after that, Frank Trigg went on and was saying like, "Oh, I was hurt. Oh, I had this health issue and that health issue, and he cheated and blah blah whatever." So Matt Hughes wanted a second fight to where Frank Trigg was fully healthy, to where he couldn't blame injuries, to where he couldn't blame health issues, to where he couldn't say that he cheated, and just beat him up, beat him fair and square, and leave it at that. So they got the chance. I believe it was at UFC 52. And so once again, Matt Hughes and Frank Trigg were in there. They were fighting. And if you look on there, Frank Trigg hits Matt Hughes with an illegal knee in the groin. And Matt Hughes looks to the ref to stop it because it was blatantly obvious. This is why and by the way, their referee was Mario Yamasaki. And no one likes Mario Yamasaki. He's a terrible referee, but whatever. So they were looking at him. So Matt Hughes looked at him to stop it. And when that happened, he got taken to the ground. Frank Trigg got his back eventually and tried to sink in a rear naked choke on him as a karmactic. Is that a word? For karma's sake. And was trying to choke him out. But Matt Hughes turned it around, came back, and the famous clip of Matt Hughes picking Frank Trigg up and running across from one end to the other of the ring or the octagon, threw him to the ground, got on top of him, dropped some big elbows on him, choked him out, got him in a rear naked choke again, choked him out, and it was over and done with. The only bad part is that Matt Hughes wanted to either knock him out or make him tap out to strikes. Didn't happen, but Matt Hughes still won the fight. And so that is why it's number 3. Because he came back from adversity. Number 2. This was a lot of people's favorites. McGregor versus Diaz. Okay, now I know they fought twice already. And the first time, I believe it was the first time, Nate Diaz caught him in a rear naked choke, and McGregor had to tap out, which McGregor at this point in time in his career was an outstanding MMA fighter. Okay, he was fantastic. He was just running through the entire division and just knocking guys out, submitting them, going the distance if it ever went the distance, which it hardly ever did. Would go the distance and McGregor would still win. And because he was just a fantastic fighter. The first one, Diaz took the fight on a short notice. Okay, he took it on a short notice. I believe he had like 3 weeks to prepare for it, cut the weight, train, get to the point where he could go in there and fight, and beat him with a rear naked choke. And his famous saying of all time, Joe Rogan asked, he didn't ask him, he said, "Diaz, you just shook up the world." And Nate Diaz, or Nick, younger Diaz, I always get them mixed up, said, "I'm not surprised." And their second fight was just an all-out, brutal war. They were throwing big haymakers, just knocking each other around. One would get rocked, come back, and then he would rock the other, come back. Just an outstanding fight. Very, very entertaining to watch. I love this one. I love these fights, both of them, even though McGregor lost the first one, and I believe Diaz lost the second one. Great fights, and very entertaining to watch. So that's why it's number 2. Number 1. All right, number 1. Here we go. This was the most loved fight that I saw. Most loved, most entertaining of all time, of all the fights. It changed MMA as it is today. And it has to be number 1. And it is Forrest Griffin versus Stephan Bonnar. Okay? This fight was, by the way, it's their first one, just saying. Forrest Griffin versus Stephan Bonnar was an outstanding fight to watch, and it came at a pinnacle point in the UFC organization, because at this time the UFC was just bought by the Fertittas and Dana White, And they created a show called The Ultimate Fighter. Okay, it's where the guys would come in, they would fight to stay in the house, they'd all live together. They would have two coaches the two coaches were either like the champion or former champions, and they would coach against each other. They would go through events, like different team events, and they would fight to stay in the house. I already said that. And then at the end, they would crown, for this one, I believe it was middleweight and light heavyweight. And at this point in time, the two light heavyweights that made it to the end were Stephan Bonnar and Forrest Griffin. Okay, so this fight was very entertaining because it was only, I believe it was 3 rounds, just an all-out brutal fight. They were two equally matched dudes, and this is at the time where the UFC wasn't selling as many pay-per-views as they are now. They weren't even selling anywhere close to as many pay-per-views as they are now. And Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar, they went out there and they went out to fight, and it was such a great fight that Dana White offered both of them contracts to be in the UFC. This was one of those fights where when you watch it, you're like, and you think and you know where the UFC was at this time. It's one of those fights where you're like, okay, this is going to change. Because I don't remember this personally, but I remember because I wasn't allowed to watch it. My parents didn't allow me to watch it at the time. But I remember my dad and some of our friends, they were sitting in the living room watching it, and I remember hearing people out there in the living room calling up each other going, hey man, you got to turn on your TV and turn it to this channel, whatever channel it was on. And because there's two guys on there just beating the ever-living crap out of each other. I mean, everyone did that. You know, if you were watching it and you knew your friends weren't, you called them like, hey, get over here right now. There's an awesome fight going on. You have to see this. And still to this day, I'll go back and watch it on the UFC app. I'll go back and watch it and just remember how important this fight was. So this has to be number 1. So let's go over them again one more time before I close out. John Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson is number 5. Dan Henderson versus Michael Bisping. Matt Hughes versus Frank Trigg. Conor McGregor versus Diaz. And Forrest Griffin versus Stephan Bonnar. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think about this list here, and hope y'all enjoyed. Stay tuned for more videos like this. Subscribe for more videos just like this. Comment down below what y'all's list is, and I'll see you next time, guys. All right, God bless you all. Peace.